Emma, great to see you. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat because I know you're busy with procurement stuff because we were just talking about that a second ago. I wanted to start the interview by asking you about something that you flagged up when we were talking, a month or so or a couple of months ago, whenever it was. And because it was such an interesting statement, you said to me, the average age of a homeless person is about 45.
Mm,
Now, that firstly, I thought that was horrifying. That's the first thing, because you often think that homeless people are young people. I mean, that's pretty horrifying anyway. But the fact that they're
mm,
45 and homeless is also horrific. And but what also intrigued me was how that's connected to your business. I mean, just
mm.
tell us about that statement and why does it matter in the context of what you're trying to do?
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me. So, I'm a consultant clinical psychologist by background, and I've spent my career 20 years or more in the NHS trying to innovate in the healthcare space to improve practice for working with homeless individuals. And that statement is really at the centre of the drive of what I've done across my career, both clinically in the NHS and now in health tech solutions, training frontline staff. Uh, Homeless individuals, people with multiple disadvantage, that's multiple needs, physical
Yeah.
health, poor mental health, high levels of trauma, have an average life expectancy of 45 years old. So that's my age. I would be looking at death now, potentially, if I was homeless. And lots of people die younger because of the multiple needs and also the disrupted patterns of care. Often people haven't had good experiences early in life with caregivers that should have looked after them, but were actually harmful and threatening, in contact with care systems that have let people down and disrupted people's access to care. So people have very hard lives and they don't trust easily. They don't seek care easily. They're very self-reliant, have been burnt and let down by care. And so people don't get access to healthcare treatments soon. They can live really risky lives. They may use drugs and alcohol to cope with and block out the trauma as a survival strategy that then becomes the problem. And I think that all sorts of reasons people are exposed to really severe life conditions that can impact your health and well-being, really high levels of diabetes and serious other unaddressed health conditions.
Yeah.
So all of this impacts people's life expectancy. And so people, you can find people that are chronically homeless in and out of services, might spend time rough sleeping in hostels, maybe spend some time with friends and family, but actually struggle to find a stable place to live. And all of that can then impact people's health. Uh,
Yeah.
so I mean, this is shocking how in today's society in the UK, and these are national Western statistics actually, that we have
Yeah.
people dying at the age of 45 and living, we call them the old young. So they're living short lives with elderly health complications, and that's not being addressed.
Yeah. And let me just ask you about the scale of the problem because I
Mm,
think it's bigger than most people think. I mean, in terms of the numbers, the sort of headline numbers, I mean, perhaps in percentage terms, I mean, what size of population are we talking about here? I mean, are we talking about a few people or are we talking about significant? I mean, just give us a flavor of the size of the problem. I understand
yeah,
how serious the problem is,
yeah,
what you just said, but give us an indication of
yeah.
the size of the problem.
So we have hundreds of thousands of homeless individuals in the UK. We've got 170,000 families that are homeless in the UK currently, of children that are homeless, and that is a time bomb weight that we're feeding the next generation of
Yeah.
people with significant problems. The numbers of families that are living in temporary accommodation, children moved out of their area, that then have disrupted education, that then haven't got access to their healthcare, but all of this is adverse childhood experiences that we know cause people more likely to be at risk of homelessness, of unemployment, of other difficulties. So if you think about the amount of austerity that we've had, the increasing inequalities in our society, we're seeing more people at risk of homelessness now. We're seeing more people at risk of complex needs. So I would say that I work in complex needs, not only homelessness. So it's the primary target of the NHS to be addressing multiple overlapping needs that we're seeing. So people with physical health and mental health difficulties, because that impacts how well people live and for how long. So I think that when we think about rough sleeping, that's often the visible homelessness that's
Yeah.
the tip of the iceberg, which people that are staying in violent relationships because they haven't got somewhere else to go, or they're crashing out on a sofa some of the time, or families in temporary accommodation. Um, so I think that we can all recognize that we could easily be one step away from something significant
Yeah.
happening. But what happens is that often we might have the liberty of more safety nets.
Yeah.
Often the people with more complex needs haven't got those safety nets around them to catch themselves.
I think there's and correct me if I've got this wrong, but I think there's another issue that you've just flagged out. I mean, there's a shift. I mean, there was a lot of dialogue when the current government came to power about shifting away from kind of treating acute problems. I mean, they still need
Mm,
to be dealt with, but shifting to a sort of a more preventative model. I mean,
yes.
the point that you're making, if I've understood it correctly, is that if we reduce the problems that people experience in relation to homelessness and complex needs, what have
Mm,
you, that actually not just helps them, but stops the problem getting even bigger because it reduces the impact of those problems on their kids and their families. I mean, if I understood that issue
yes.
correctly, what you're saying is we need to do something about this because otherwise the problem gets even bigger. Have I got that
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So often in services in the acute end where I've spent my career working, we're working at the sharp end where people have had lifetimes of deprivation and trauma. That's a big problem to address. If we don't catch things early, if we don't have a preventative model for adults and for young people, it is going to be a burgeoning issue. In Scotland have become the first ACE aware nation, the first nation that is targeting being focused on adverse childhood experiences. That's ACEs. And there's kind of a list of 10 adverse child experiences. There's some of the biggest data sets we have on mental health and well-being outcomes are linked to the ACE studies in the States and then
Yeah.
replicated in Wales. And what that shows is that if you have multiple forms of adverse childhood experience, you're much more likely to have poor health and well-being outcomes. You're more likely to smoke and drink and have unemployment. You're more likely to have a heart attack. You're more likely to get cancer. You're more likely to get diabetes. So if you have four or more adverse childhood experiences, the pathway to chronic health conditions and poor outcomes are massively increased. If you have four or more ACEs, so that might be including very common things like parental divorce and separation, a parent with alcohol or drug difficulties, if there was violence in the family home, if there was a parent that was incarcerated, if there were mental health, if you had a parent with mental health difficulties. So many of those, we could easily begin
Yeah.
to tick off one or two of those. But when you get to four or more, that's where you see significant impacts. And in Scotland, they've done a really preventative intervention. They've tried to make the whole country ACE aware. So everything from teachers, taxi drivers, police, they're being trained in spotting the signs of ACEs so that we can all be doing our bit to try and get in early and change the life
Yeah.
course for people. And that's not only about children, it's called adverse childhood experiences. But even as adults, we can have learned security, we can go on to address conditions we've avoided. The prevention issue is a key
Yeah.
priority. Governments talk about it coming going all the time. There's different focuses on whether we're offering prevention. I think when you're in climates where budgets are really stretched, sometimes you're in survival mode of you have to fund the A&E, you can't get the preventative
Yeah. Yeah.
interventions, but we can't think that the system isn't linked up. Mm.
No. And I think the other interesting thing about what you've said, I mean, you may or may not agree with this, but it seems to me that the good thing about defining it as adverse childhood experiences sort of changes the debate.
Mm.
Because previously there was a debate about deprivation and people being poor and the impact that that had.
Mm.
what you're saying is that if you think about it in terms of a portfolio of potentially negative experiences, you mentioned 10, I think, that could happen to young people, you've then got something that's a bit more tangible that you can kind of measure, you can assess, you can work out what's going on simply by saying, oh, these people are deprived. I mean, they may be deprived, but okay, well, what do you do about that? You can
Yeah.
actually tackle some of those adverse experiences, can't you? I mean, do you think
Yes.
that's a fair summary?
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're talking about deprivation, we also think about it more broadly. So I think
Yeah.
sometimes in our everyday thinking, we can think, oh, that means poor. But actually, when we're thinking about multiple deprivation, we're also thinking about race and racism and inequality and gender imbalances. And so actually, people may be excluded and marginalized for all sorts of reasons. It's not only, but it is importantly also about the kind of your wealth and your financial
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing about the ACE thing that sounds is that it's very something very tangible that you can work
Yeah.
on, you can take action to address it, you can evaluate whether it's had the actions have had the impact. I mean, that was the
Mm.
point I was getting at, which seems to me
Yeah, yeah.
the right direction was the
Yeah, I think it normalizes it that we can all recognize ourselves in those, and
yeah,
we can all see what we can practically do as well. And it's really well researched. There's a huge body of evidence, and I think what sometimes surprises people as difficult early experiences, we can think, oh, that might affect someone's mental health, but to think you're more likely to get cancer or you're more likely to have diabetes, that really is surprising to people sometimes
yeah.
that physical health and the mind and the body are so linked as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let me put you on the spot a little bit here. So, one of the things that's happened in the last week or two is that our new PM, Andy
Mm,
Burnham, has announced some work to reduce rough sleeping, I think was what he focused on, building on the work he's done in Manchester. I mean, if you were to offer Andy Burnham a little bit of advice about where to go with that policy, I mean, what would you be saying that the PM needs to do to expand and develop that?
yeah. So I know Andy Burnham from his work in Manchester. I've worked
Yeah.
a lot in Manchester and on homelessness issues. He's always had a real particular personal interest in addressing this and has got some good track record. So what I like about that approach, and I think is what we need to be doing, is having a holistic view of what we mean by
Right.
homelessness and needs. So it's not only a housing issue, he also recognises the multiple complex needs that can come on, how we properly fund services, how people are given wraparound support as well. Because I think placing someone in an accommodation and thinking that they're going to manage to sustain that is not going to work for everybody. And so you need to have a variety of support. So 94% of homeless individuals have a history of trauma. 94% of people in our prisons have a history of trauma. 50% of homeless individuals have a brain injury. Like these are things that need also treatment and care and support. It's not only about housing, it's about that interrelationship. So I think my advice would be to think holistically, to definitely think we need to build affordable homes and also have a variety of services and offers. And make sure that we're supporting our frontline teams to be able to offer that. So I really like not only, I think all his policies are really interrelating what he's talking about. Let's see if the rhetoric translates into practice. But it's not only about housing in isolation, we're also thinking about people not in education, employment, or training. What are we doing for our young people to get them into work?
Yeah.
What are we doing to help health and social care, particularly social care, because NHS is holding that weight of impacts because social care can't support people to get out of hospitals when they're blocking beds and
Yeah.
into their own home, etc. So all of this is interrelated. You can't treat one bit of the system in isolation. And I think he has a systems lens, which I'm hopeful will translate into practice. And that's what I'd be recommending. We need to recognize that it's nothing in isolation or people fall through the cracks of the next hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I guess we'll find out how much
Mm,
progress he's going to be able to make on that. You mentioned getting support to frontline staff.
yes.
I mean, we've sort of had a
Mm,
quick tour around the problem. I
yes.
mean, just explain to people what you're trying to do, your bit of the jigsaw that you're trying to, work on to help fix the problem. I mean, just tell us about what Aneemo,
Yeah.
give us a flavour of
Um,
that.
So, Aneemo, as you can see behind me, is a health and social care platform. We train frontline staff in the voluntary sector, health, social care, criminal justice, to improve their work with individuals with complex needs, health needs, and homelessness is one of those. And I think that that's really important. Is not that we're very problem led. That Anna has come out of a solution to address we have the evidence of ACEs. We know what the impact of trauma, we know the impact of homelessness, etc. But the staff feel de-skilled. I've built two homeless neuro services in the NHS, but they're very isolated. Actually, people consistently have been coming to me globally to ask how we work with individuals with brain injury and other difficulties. How are we addressing trauma-informed approaches? So that's what I've spent the last 7, 8 years building with the Aneemo platform. We're now in 39 countries, training 20+ thousand users monthly to help them improve their work with help frontline teams improve their work with
And just
homeless
give us
individuals.
give us a flavour of what that means in practice. So
Yeah.
when you say, I mean, is it delivered online? I mean, is it? I mean, just give us a
Mm.
practical flavour of the sorts of things that you're doing for those people.
Yeah. So we're predominantly a digital solution to help the scale and impact and have that reach. We have bite-sized, expert-led video-based content, not seen elsewhere. So really that leading evidence-based practice. So I've built the largest homeless psychology service in Europe. I've gathered the biggest data set globally in homelessness and mental health intervention. So it's all of those decades of experience and evidence-based and drawing other international experts in to produce content on our platform, which makes a really important user experience. People can have an expert in the palm of their hand when they're on an outreach shift in a dark alley, wondering, this person is saying that they want to end their life. What do I say about that? I can't remember this training I did 6 months ago. Where's my risk flow chart? Where's my strengths-based questions? So actually, it helps people have those tools. So it's videos alongside downloadable worksheets, interactive components, and we just launched our first virtual reality immersive learning as well,
Wow. Wow.
with
And what's
backing
that
from,
covering? What's that focus?
yeah. So with backing from Innovate UK and the Women Innovation Award, we've pioneered a brain injury and immersive virtual reality learning where people can be thrown into challenging situations faced with an AI-driven virtual human to de-escalate scenarios that they might face in the front line. It's really important that staff have a chance to practice these skills before they face them. And actually, we see really high levels of burnout and vicarious trauma and turnover in our frontline workforce, which is really our primary problem. Our company assesses the primary need of supporting our workforce in order for them to support the primary need of those clients that we started our journey talking about. And so these virtual immersive scenarios allow people to practice in the safety of a virtual environment, allow them to practice over and again. You get a coaching report at the end. You can go back and try the same situation and practice your skills. Frontline managers and organizations can feel assured that people have been signed off and can reach a certain level of engagement. So things like empathic engagement and support skills, assessing for a brain injury and spotting the signs that someone might have neurological issues, de-escalating a scenario, managing alcohol-related brain damage is one of our situations, for example, using motivational interviewing skills, so learning therapeutic tools. So lots of applications where we're finding that people want that real-time learning, but without the embarrassment of do it in a role play. And also the scalability. You can have an expert that's consistent and reliable. These are clinically informed, trauma informed, and clinically managed AI systems that really people can know what they're getting in the tutorials. So that's where we're really trying to offer a variety of learning methods to help frontline teams with their practice. And we also offer blended learning. So often people want to do e-learning of the video-based content and then come to a reflective practice. And we've got a big affiliate network of clinicians that can then do a live session or live training blended. But really for the scalability and impact, we're a digital first solution.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty impressive, I would say. And the thing that was going through my mind as you were talking is that it's one of the challenges I think around training staff in those settings is helping people stay up to speed with things.
Yeah.
And the great thing, I mean, in my day, you go on a course for a day or a couple of days or whatever, and that was fine. But you can't. It's difficult to take your staff out for when they're stretched anyway. It's difficult to take people
Yes.
chunks of time. Whereas your model is much more, if you like, accessible in terms of fitting it into your workload.
Yeah.
Which seems to me to be a really positive thing for people because they might want to do things first thing in the morning or at lunchtime or in the evening or at the weekend because that's
Exactly.
more convenient for them and their life than it is going on a
Mm.
1 day, you know, professional development thing. So I like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
really like the fact that the people involved, you create the an opportunity for them to fit it into their work pattern
Yes.
life, if
Yeah.
they're working part time or whatever.
Yeah.
That seems to me a really
Exactly.
important bonus.
There's lots of ways that it can benefit the organisations that we work with.
Mm.
You've touched on many. So people might be relief staff, night staff,
Yeah,
agency,
yeah,
weekend. There can be rapid turnover where staff they need to quickly make sure people have got the fundamentals, and it's not appropriate to wait 6 months to go on an annual training. People also forget. The
yeah,
retention
yeah,
levels are so much higher
yeah,
if you have a digital or blended offer, and people can dip in and return to as they need to. And also with the virtual reality, the research shows there's much higher retention because it's an emotional and empathic. It enhances empathy and it has an emotional connection because you're really immersed within the
yeah,
learning scenario. So it helps people remember the key points. And I think that it being any device accessible is also key. So people can bring it up on a
yeah,
tablet when they're out in the community. And it's cost effective. So it's cost effective in terms of being affordable to buy a unit to access a course, but also that the time out of service and the cover that you were mentioning is absolutely critical when people have got kind of such busy stretched roles.
yeah.
So I think the reason I've created Aneemo was because I saw the gaps and the problems in the existing offers from being a clinician for 20 years. Mm.
Yeah. I mean, thank you for setting that out because that I think gives people a better flavour of what it is
Mm,
you're doing. Let's talk about building a business.
mm.
So, I mean, let's go back to the beginning. So, you decide that you're going to sort this problem out.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Ah, it well, it didn't quite go that way round actually. It well, I'm busy delivering my clinical services and talking relentlessly at conferences and writing and publishing, writing books, traveling, talking internationally. Um, Maybe at 20 plus conferences a year, like
Wow.
training staff, traveling around the UK for organizations, training them in trauma informed practice and how to get the evidence base that we had created in my clinical work, how to um, share how to work with complex needs populations. There was such a demand, and I thought there's got to be a better solution that doesn't involve me traveling around, around the UK and beyond. And it coincided with talking to some people in the health ed tech space and seeing what they were doing for scalable
Right.
training solutions in their own space, and a grant from the Mayor of London. So there happened to be a rough sleeping innovation grant from the Mayor of London, that we a small kind of 20 grand grant that we put in for and was successful. And I was like, cool, we've got to do this idea now that I've had. And we launched our first product. So we built the platform, and then that funding paid for one course, which was our rough sleeping mental health awareness course,
Right.
which has now trained over 10,000 staff in 30
So
countries.
that's sorry, that's just to extrapolate that. So 20 grand and you've trained 10,000 people. So that's a couple of quid per person.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a
amazing
pretty good
investment.
value.
Yes, yeah, and then we've done another course since. So that was live since 2018. We've done another course backed by Department of Health, and OHID, so the Office of Disparities, and they have they backed another course on addressing co-occurring conditions,
Right.
and breaking down system barriers. And that's trained 3,000 people in the last 2 years. And so that will have the same scale. So those two grant funded courses have been incredible investment for from the government into addressing this, and that um, they're free on our platform for anyone to access and are an amazing resource. So we've had some of the best names in the business presenting
Yeah.
bite-sized videos in those
And
courses.
I tell you
Mm,
what's good to hear about that is that, I mean, that's an investment by government,
mm,
which has had a really good return on investment. I mean,
mm.
you probably haven't measured it in that strict sense, but
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah,
looks to me like a great return on investment.
yeah,
You very rarely hear about government investing in things that give them a good return. So that is a good news story, I think. And it's
yeah.
also a really great way to illustrate how technology can help with this
Yes.
shift from dealing with the problem to preventing the problem. Because what you're saying is, if you shift, I mean, this is an example of a step down that road towards better prevention, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that that scalability really appeals to me, to be able to reach
Yeah,
such a broad population through technology. And then we built a suite of training from that because of the success
right.
and because of the impact. And I grew the business alongside working full time in the NHS because I
Yeah,
was too passionate about both until last year, actually, when I was just like, this is such a really needs my attention. It's too big. The team is too big now to not be kind of giving it everything it can. And I feel like I've got a great clinical team that can take that work forward, and that legacy's done. And then we can really now think about spreading that impact on a much bigger scale. Yeah. So those courses are kind of like often a great acquisition point for us people to find out about us, get
yeah,
some basic free training from our kind of social enterprise arm. And then if they want further CPD courses, they can
yeah,
access
yeah,
a library of content. And so I think it works really well from a business model
yeah.
as well as a values and a social impact model. So I'm really pleased about
And
how that's structured.
and let me ask you, when was the moment when you thought I could turn this into a really good business? I mean, tell us about that moment.
Um, Probably, I mean, it's been hugely successful. Um, and probably only a couple of years ago when we
Okay.
were winners of the Women Innovation Award.
Right. And why did
And
that make you think it could suddenly work? I mean, what was the thing? What was it about that
oh,
moment that changed your perception, if you see what I mean?
I mean, well, no, I mean, I always felt like there was a huge need and a huge opportunity. I just had been so focused on providing the solution and doing a great job that I hadn't really uh, entered the startup world, or known about the growth and opportunities in the scale that it could be. I was uh it was very organic. All of our sales has been based on my reputation. It's all been inbound. We got super sticky, like 98% retention rate. We were just busy doing the do. And I think then when you take a step back and you get external validation and recognition, you suddenly think, oh, look what we've been able to look what we've been able to create, look what we've been able to achieve, and look at the demand and popularity for it. So I suppose uh, I've thought about it. It's like successful side hustle, and then I've already thought, oh, it's like ballooning into the main feature, So
Yeah,
that was really my
yeah.
shift, I suppose.
I,
Yeah.
I guess you've also illustrated, we have this kind of cliche about you've got to work on the business, not just in the business. And it kind of illustrates the value of taking a bit of time out to think, oh, where could I go with this rather than what do I need to do to get it
Mm,
done, if you see what I mean. That I think a lot of good leaders actually start out as good doers,
mm, mm.
and then
Yeah,
they
interesting.
realize that there's an opportunity to go a bit broader, a bit beyond, if you get my
Yeah,
drift.
yeah.
Let me ask you about the journey, right?
Mm.
I mean, my experience of building a business was that it was quite good fun, but it was kind of punctuated with near-death experience where things go kind of horribly wrong. I mean that may not have been the case for you, but mine was, yeah, a bit up and down. I mean, what's been your experience of the
Yeah,
journey?
I love that. Um, I am. I'm quite optimistic. You probably need to be as an entrepreneur. And I think my family have always been entrepreneurs and had business highs and successes and difficult times. And so I probably had much more of that entrepreneurial spirit than I realized as a clinical
Right.
psychologist and gone down a health role. And I think I was an entrepreneur in the NHS where I was able to grow my service to be so big and to win different contracts and not be reliant on one source of income, and to just be quite independent in staving that out. And I think that entrepreneurial spirit, you need to be able to manage those near deaths, don't you? And so it's also present in Aneemo. We had a difficult time through COVID, surprisingly. So actually, you would think, oh, everyone's panicking, everyone's going online, they're going to need to pivot. We're ripe and ready for the picking for them. But actually, people kind of went into freeze. They went
Yeah.
onto Zoom. They started to think, oh, we can probably do this ourselves, or we don't want to make decisions, or they were in survival mode, actually saving people's lives in the services that we support. So they're not thinking about those things, or they're thinking we can do it ourselves. And then they've had a go. They've tried to record themselves talking over a Zoom slideshow, realize that we have a very different offer with kind of professionally shot content, etc. And it's time consuming and they haven't got the experts. And so people kind of needed to give it a go and fail and realize what our USPs were. So I think there were lots of reasons why that was a very difficult
Yeah.
time, but a surprisingly difficult time having a digital training
But I
solution.
guess it also
Mm,
confirms why they should buy you because if they try to do it themselves and they realize how hard it is, actually
yes.
that it strengthens the case for getting you in to help them.
Yeah, yeah,
But lots of
exactly.
people
So
think, oh, we can do it ourselves, but it's often not as easy as people think.
yeah, so I think that on initially that was a challenge for us,
Mm.
but in the longer term, it's been really beneficial because people are much more hybrid now. They're much more used to
Yeah.
digesting content because before they wanted very traditional learning methods. So I think they are more digitally enabled now, and they've realised that they can't do it themselves in a cost-effective and effective way. And so yeah, that's helped us in the longer term.
I mean,
Mm.
I think it's probably fair to say you've done a lot of the heavy lifting, if you like, for the business. I mean, how do you see the next stage of its development?
So we've been in a consolidation, and I'd say we're in a scale up phase now. So we've developed our library of content. We know what our audience want. We've developed those routes to market and relationships. So thinking about what our go to market looks like for different
Right,
sectors,
right.
such as health and social care, the genteel pace of procurement, as we were touching
That's
on.
very
Um,
diplomatically put.
there's lots of bureaucracy, lots of challenges. The people that really want it can't always get it easily, and
Yeah.
so how do we work with those structures, get the business that works? So I think that we've been developing that. 4% of our market is in Australia, so the next priority is making sure everyone who needs to know about us in the UK has access to that. And so really penetrating those voluntary health and social care sectors, then looking at continuing to build on our overseas territories. Particularly California is our first beachhead in the States, Canada, and Australia, where we already have some traction. So I'd say there are priorities is making sure that now we know the sectors and we have the content, that we are reaching the people that
Yeah.
need it.
Yeah,
Mm.
pretty exciting, I would say.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting
Yes.
stuff. Well, and let me ask you one more question, just one last question about the building the business bit. I mean, what's the end game? I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs say world domination. Beyond world domination, I mean, what's the end game here? Where do you want to get to with this?
So, medium term, in the next 5 years, I want us to train more than 1 million frontline staff. Um,
Big
and that,
ambition.
yeah, and that would save 20 billion globally every year through the
Wow.
health and social care
So a good
savings.
return on investment.
Yeah, a really good investment in the places that really need that. And to look at scaling it so that we can reach those overseas territories. We can take the amazing best practice that we have in the UK and share that more broadly, to reach those parts of society that are so often
Yeah.
overlooked.
Yeah.
Mm.
And just a quick question, what role does AI play in that journey? I mean, I don't know how much AI you've got in the system
Mm.
currently, but how do you see, I mean, everyone talks about AI all the time. I
Yeah.
mean, what's your take on that issue?
Yep. So we are definitely becoming an AI first business. We're really integrating it into all of our processes. Our coup is really looking, our chief operating officer, she's a leader in business transformation in FTSE 100 businesses, and has brought a lot of new technologies into large corporations. And so we have that privilege of really
Yeah.
having the be an early adopter across our internal systems, across our business processes, but also then in our offer. So we're building new technology which allows us to integrate AI more into our customer user journey, into our platform. And then, of course, we've got our AI driven virtual human offer that we're continuing to build on. And that includes using our proprietary data sets to fine tune large language models to make our AI really clinically informed and trauma informed. Yeah, so that's we're doing it with our product as well as
Yeah.
throughout the business. I think it's essential.
Yeah. I mean, AI is not going to go away, would be
Mm,
my reading of it. So it's going to be an interesting few years on that front, I suspect. Let me ask you about being the CEO. I mean, most of the CEOs I speak to would say it's an interesting experience being a
mm.
CEO. I mean, what's your take on it?
Um, I I'm probably always a leader. I think even if I try and sit back, I'm gonna come to the front. And so actually it's a place that I feel comfortable to set a vision, to think innovatively, to inspire others and to bring them with me in a compassionate way. So actually I think that what I'm really proud of is the culture that I've been able to build. And I've got a track record of doing that in the healthcare as well as in my own business. We just had a member of staff leave for personal reasons, and she, on exit interviews, she was really talking about and actually a lot of people have said this to us, the culture that we have within our organization is phenomenal, second to none. And she says now in any role that she looks for, the number one criteria is going to be culture, and the psychological safety and ability to create a place where people can fail and feel held so that they can really stretch and grow and succeed, and to create an environment where everyone thrives. I don't think you need to be a boss that's cutthroat to get results. Actually, I get the best results. I attract the most phenomenal people to work with me for a fraction of what they're paid on the going market because they believe in what we're doing and they believe in me. So I think it's something that fits naturally for me. I'm really comfortable and happy to hold the weight of the challenges and buffer that from the team, but create and inspire people. And that's what I do when I consult to organizations. And that's what Aneemo does when we're helping organizations be trauma informed. So although we're starting in working in health and social care in the voluntary sector, actually we're starting to have conversations with the private sector and with large corporations about how that learning of setting a good culture and supporting their workforce is relevant whatever your sector is in. So that's been really interesting to talk to kind of large banking and telecoms teams about how we support their workforce. So yeah, it's a hat I'm comfortable wearing. I like to.
And let me ask you about I mean, to what extent does your identity as an
Mm,
individual shape the way you've approached leading the business? I mean,
yeah.
what's the connection there?
Well, you, I definitely have a thread of being a psychologist through my leadership approach for sure, as you can just hear from what I was just saying. And I believe in being authentic and warm and having a light touch with things. So I think that those kind of personality characteristics definitely are important in my leadership. My identity as a psychologist, and as a mentor, and as a support to others is crucial in my leadership approach as well. I don't think that means I don't make difficult conversations. And there's a lot of research on emotional intelligence in leadership. And actually, that's why I believe women can be so strong in leadership, is because there's research showing that level of emotional intelligence can really be brought to leadership in a strong but compassionate way. But yeah, I think it's really important people recognize where their strengths are and what their personality characteristics are and what makes up their identity. And I would say I'm equally, like, I don't always just introduce myself as a psychologist. I might say I'm also a tech founder. That's a new hat that I'm trying to get comfortable wearing as well. So yeah.
But one of the challenges that creates is particularly for people that are building business from the ground up,
Mm,
is how do you separate your identity from the identity of the company?
that's a really great
I
question.
mean, what's your take on that challenge? I mean, it may not have presented itself with too many problems, but for example, if
Mm,
you get taken over, if you want to
yeah,
exit,
yeah,
if you want to buy other company, it the your identity and the identity of the company are pretty closely linked. I mean, that
yeah.
potentially could create problems. What's your take on that?
So that's it's really interesting depending on who you talk to and on what that end game looks like and the strategy for the business. So definitely my reputation and credibility has been a key driver for the business. And as I said, a lot of that's been inbound, but my pool, however far reaching, is finite. And so we need to
Yeah.
have a bigger impact beyond my relationship. And also, what that happens if I wasn't around, how would the business thrive? So, I
Yeah.
think in these early years, it's really important that we're using me as a key person of influence, using that reputation, building that credibility for the brand, but that we're bringing in different authors, that it becomes bigger than who I am, that our marketing and sales strategy expands beyond me, so that over time that I can become less visible or part of the ecosystem of what we offer, because I'm not the only person um, uh, who can help people with multiple disadvantages. We've got other amazing authors that are working with us in young person services, in offending,
Mm.
and we're looking to launch into the elder care vertical. So that how the brand evolves to have that clinical credibility as the central strand, not the Dr. Williamson as the central strand, is part of our strategy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's one thing to say that it's more difficult to do, of course. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of work involved there. But I think that's your point's well made about that. To do anything at scale, you're going to have people that bring skills and talents to the table that
Yes.
can help complement what you can do, isn't it? So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
let me ask you about the underlying bit here. So building a business, as you've already illustrated by what you takes commitment.
Mhm.
Where does that commitment come from for you personally?
Mm, a nice reflective question. I am I think that I'm very ambitious, and whatever I'm
I
going
would
to
never
do,
have
I'm
guessed
going
that.
whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to be the best at it. Um, so that I don't like, I've got really high standards, and I think that is kind of a self-flagellatory style that is all I'm going to beat myself up and get
Yeah, yeah,
better and to kind of push on. And I care about what I do, but I've
yeah,
always been enthusiastic whatever I've done, from at uni kind of working in a bar or plate washing. I'm always going to do that the best that I can. And so I think there's personality traits there of working hard and being the best, but I really believe in improving the lives of those that have been disadvantaged. And in my early life, my mum would often kind of rescue people and give support to people and have people staying at our home. And we always had really open doors. And if it wasn't rescue animals, she was an art teacher. It was children that were having difficulties at home and had permission to stay, or some au pairs that got chucked out of a house down the road or something, that we were always had this open door. And so I think that's part of my culture, is bringing striving for high standards, working hard, being ambitious, but then the care element as part of that. And that
yeah.
probably is the two of my parents, my entrepreneurial dad and my mum. So yeah, it's a really interesting question that I'll reflect more on, actually, where
Yeah.
what drives me.
Let me ask you about one of the other things that kind of flows from commitment and flows from building a business. I mean, and I'm not being critical of academia, but in an academic setting, you maybe watch videos or you listen to lectures and you write essays, you read books, and all that stuff's fine. And that's one way of learning. When
Mm,
you're a CEO, you kind of have to learn from the consequences of your actions. So, you might do
mm,
something and it works, you might do something and it doesn't work. Either way, you face the consequences.
yeah, yeah.
What's your take on learning about how to build a business, how to be a good CEO, in that very kind of learning by doing way, which
Yeah.
is very different from the kind of academic bit. And the reason I ask is, you're a doctor. You've kind of
Mm,
worked all your way through the academic world. And
yeah.
a good thing. But this is a different kind of learning, isn't it? Learning
Yeah.
to be a
Yeah.
good CEO, to be a good leader. What's your take
Yeah.
on that?
Um, I I think that that's absolutely right, is that there's different ways to learn on the job. And I'm actually dyslexic, but I only discovered relatively recently.
Ah,
And academic studies have never been very easy for me, surprisingly, with 4 degrees, including a doctorate and a couple of masters. I'm definitely overcompensating from feeling very stupid through my early school life, when I couldn't read till I was 12. And I think I masked that a lot. And I do learn
right.
through doing, and I don't learn through rote traditional ways. I think there's a huge proportion of entrepreneurs that are dyslexic, actually. And I think that is really interesting and tells us a lot about the creative way that they think. They can see transferable learning in different areas. So I will see something in one particular area, and I can pattern match. I can spot how that same idea can be translated from the NHS into business, into different sectors, into verticals, into different territories. I can spot those opportunities in a very creative way. So I definitely learn by doing. And I'd also say what you're talking about is actually very part of a psychologist's natural role, because our training is as a scientist practitioner. So we're actually doing mini experiments all the time to try something out, to test, to reflect, hone, and adapt. So actually, it is very much what we learn
Yeah.
clinically. Surprisingly, people might think. So I think that makes me really well placed. And I'm a quick learner, and I'm smart. So I like to surround myself with people that I really respect, get lots of mentors, really use people very well to help me grow and develop. I'll spot a gap and I'll think, who knows about that and who can coach me on that? So I'm not ashamed to ask for help. I really respect learning from others, and we'll learn on the job. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the learning on the job thing, I think, is really important because businesses evolve.
Mm,
I mean, you start one place and over a period of time, you evolve into something else that might
yeah.
be related to where you started or might be completely different. I mean, we call
Yeah.
that a pivot in the kind
Mm,
of modern idiom, but it's about evolution, really. And
yeah.
learning about how to evolve is about the practice. It's not about the
Yes.
theory, it's about the practice. So, I mean, your point is really well made, I think. And let me ask you about that. I mean, what would you say you have learnt from your successes? I'm going to ask you about what you've learned from failures in a moment, but let's start with the good stuff. I mean, what have you learnt from your successes?
um, I think stick with it. You'll always find a way. Like, I don't give up easily, but that includes knowing when to pivot and when to try a
Mm.
different route. But I do think there's something around sticking around long enough and having knowing what direction you want to go for, and then finding the opportunity. Now, that is the same clinically as it is for business in the business world. So clinically, with homeless individuals, they don't want to trust you. They're like, who are you to come and talk to me? I don't want to tell some stranger my most difficult personal things that I'm even managing by blocking it out, etc. So I often talk to people about walking alongside and building that trust and looking for the window of opportunity, and then it comes. It's the same with you're trying to get funding for a service, and you need to wait and build those relationships or that business deal to come. And but also being able to evaluate when actually you need to change tact and strategy. So I think tenacity, consistency, and self-belief, but with a reflective element. That's what I've learned from my success.
And what about
Mm.
the horrible things that have gone horribly wrong? The failures. I mean, what have you learned from failure?
um, Equally, well, I've lost key funding or key customers that pretty much your whole business or your whole NHS service relies on. And you don't want to be reliant on kind of one or two strands of funding, even as cushy as that is at the time. And so really diversifying those funding strands, diversifying the markets that we reach is another way that we're looking at that now. And having a range of offers so that we can manage those ebbs and flows of the natural challenges that come up. So I wouldn't put all my eggs in any one basket of one product, one customer, one funding strand. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So you're
you.
talking about de-risking.
Yeah, lovely. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. A couple of final questions before we wind up. I mean, what would you see of all the things that you've talked about is the key to being, would you say is the key to being a successful CEO?
Um, I think humility, and and tenacity, like a combination of humility and self-belief and caring about those people around you, you will attract good people, and you can't do it on your own. My business is great because I've got an amazing team,
Mm.
and I can back myself, but it's not the one man band. It's not an Emma show. We need to be able to attract great people, and the key to being a good CEO is having that vision, knowing where you're going, but bringing great people with you. And that means caring about your people. And that's the same for my customers. How do I help my
Yeah.
customers? I help them care about their people.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if you were to offer one piece of advice to a CEO starting out, wanting to do something like what you're doing or wanting to build a business, I mean, what would your one golden nugget of advice be?
Take support, have a menu of support, and really listen to people. So
Mhm.
don't be too independent to feel like you've got to do it all yourself, or you've got to know about it, or you can't admit when you don't know something. Actually, I really seek out an amazing group of people around me, and that will evolve as have different needs. But I think we need boosting up. You've got to shoulder yourself up and think who's in your team of solidarity to help you, because it can be lonely at the top, and some things aren't appropriate to share with your teams. So who
Yeah.
are you turning to? Who's your advisors? Who's your kind of expert mentors that you look up to? Because when the chips are down, you can turn to that person, but you can also have that person in your head
Yeah.
saying, oh, what will Paul say when I'm facing this really difficult situation? And unfortunately, I've met a few people that have got me in my head going, oh, what would Emma say in that situation? So it passes on down the chain. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's attachment in the workplace that we're talking about there. So yeah, ask for help, get support, think about how you broaden that network.
Yeah, some great advice there, Emma. Thank you for that. Thank you for making a bit of time to come and have a chat. Thank you for telling the story. I mean, fascinating project you're working on, and given what's happening with the government at the moment, I mean, very, very timely.
Mm,
And I think really exciting if you can make a dent on the kind of problem that you want to make a dent on. I mean, that would be really valuable. So good luck. Good luck going forward. I mean, I hope it plays out well.
thank you so much.
See you soon. Bye bye.
Thanks.